Now, you may have heard when I was away, perhaps a month ago now, for when Casey Bonetto, maybe 6 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago or so, Casey Bonetto was filling in for me and spoke to an expert in negotiation, talking about that in more general terms. That expert happens to be Sam Trattles, who is a negotiation and business coach and author of I Love Negotiating and Negotiating Your Worth. So what Ben and I decided to do, because it has been so fraught and so much pressure brought to bear upon the workplace, upon schools, upon homes, upon aged care, all these settings are often involving employees and employers, or two people who have got a compromise to strike. It's the art of the negotiation. So we thought, let's bring Sam back and focus on more the intricacies of coming up with clear communication and positive outcomes for both parties. And Sam, I welcome you now. Sam Trattles, thanks for joining me.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
One thing about knowing your worth, I suppose, is knowing what the other party in the negotiation is seeking to attain. Is it knowing goals, knowing roles in these sorts of conversations helpful for shaping an outcome?
Absolutely. I think it's about great communication is about listening to one another and feeling like you're being heard. And the only way to do that is for us to actually sit back and ask good questions and listen to one another.
How do you know what the good questions might be, though?
Well, it's depending on the situation. It's really about understanding, well, how are you feeling? What are you wanting to get from this? Where's the blocks? Again, it's case-by-case scenario, but we need to start to think about how do I open up the conversation rather than being accusatory. There's three ways to say why, and, why do you do it that way, or why do you do it that way? And so, there's many ways we can say the same question, but it's about how do you catch that in a way that makes that other person feel really comfortable to respond to that, and that you do really want to know the answer to why they have come to their position or why they feel like that.
Right now, right across the country and from each day to the next, there's a lot of these high-pressure conversations that are taking place. Employers are under pressure. Employees are under pressure. They might be on contract. They may actually only be on sort of short-term arrangements. How do we deal with pressure? How do we not let the pressure get to the clarity and the fairness of the conversation?
Yeah, what a wonderful question. Thank you. I think, everyone's under pressure from whatever angle it is, employee or employer, and the way through it is for us to think about, well, what are we trying to solve here? So, do I understand what my employee needs from me? Do I understand what my employer's going through? So we're often not thinking about it from the other person's perspective. And if we sit back and take a moment and explain that, and not just be in this, I'm the boss, so I should have all the answers, and I'm the employee and I should be told what to do. We need to sort of turn around and go, hey, we're in this together. How can we help one another for a great outcome?
There's a degree of emotional intelligence in this. There's about understanding the other party, but it's also too not succumbing to the emotion of the discussion. That you need to be quite clear, I'd imagine, putting the emotions aside, about what is a fair and reasonable outcome. How do you manage to separate, the strategic and logic side of this from the emotional, which the two become so quickly embroiled?
Yeah, they absolutely do. I think the reality is we're humans, so we are going to get emotional about things, and it's about how we recover from that to make sure that it comes around to a conversation. So if someone's getting excited or frustrated in a meeting, the temperature goes a bit higher, the words get a bit louder and more direct. So, what are the tactics that we can put into place to de-escalate these things? And it can be as simple as, hey, let's just take a break. Let's get a coffee. Let's walk outside. It can be actually changing the conversation from inside, sitting down, facing one another, to a walk and talk, and changing the environment. But we're going to get upset, and these things will happen. It's just how do we How do we have that? Oh, I'm sorry I got upset. What I'm trying to say is this, and this. Are we okay to keep the conversation going?
Is negotiating, that's just as much part of the picture for small business as it is for large.
Absolutely. I mean, the difference I think in small business is the start of my career, was working in a brand and then coming out and being a business owner in the last sort of 8 years. I had no idea how often I would have to talk about money and my worth. And in a society where our cultural taboos say we shouldn't talk about money because it's rude, that's been very challenging for me, and I suspect a lot of business owners struggle to negotiate their worth a lot because it's awkward talking about money.
It's really awkward, and also made even more difficult because there's a power differential in a lot of these conversations.
There is. And first of all, I want to say that we have to damn the taboos. I believe that if we're going to succeed and negotiate our worth, we have to say, okay, I know it's uncomfortable, but I need to do everything I can to prepare for that conversation so I have the confidence to explain to someone, these are my rates, this is the reason why, and if your budget can't meet that, that's okay. I can work to a different budget, but you can't get everything in the bucket.
And knowing when to say no and finding the courage to say no. It almost took me 5 years as a freelancer to learn to say no. Why is it so difficult?
Well, again, I mean, Australians are really polite, and our cultural taboos say that when you say what you don't want, that's you being a bit difficult. So we need to find, what are 10 ways to say no? No thank you, no but, no and, no how about, finding ways that really work for you, that you feel comfortable hearing it come out of your mouth and practicing it. We don't have to say no. It doesn't have to be rude. It's about saying, hey, no, that really doesn't work for my business. And if I had a board of directors, they would tell me that's not commercially viable. What would you do if you were in my position?
Oh, that's good. That's good. I might have to write that down. What about the other side of this argument? And that is when an employer puts to you a favour that they're asking you to redeem, they're asking you to do extra shifts, extra hours, and you know that the right thing to do in principle is to be a team player, but you also need to protect your own interests and your own your own sense of fairness. How can you manage your worth and still be seen as a team player?
That's a really interesting dilemma, especially at the moment when there is such a massive staff shortages. There's lots of shiny things and lots of people offering you, thousands of dollars to take another job. You should absolutely feel valued, but we all need to do our little part to help. It's just when it becomes too much. If the boss you pick up the phone and it's the boss and they're asking you again to do an extra shift, again to work a little later, there's a point where it's like, no, we've got to have a conversation about this. And I think it's the first step is to sit down and say, hey, did you know that you've called me 3 times in the last 2 weeks to do this? I really think we need to talk about what's the realities of how we're going to manage this moving forward.
Let's turn the table, because I think that's a useful exercise. Philip was just talking about small businesses, and that often involves small teams. Many of us might be employing 1 or 2 people, or maybe a staff of a larger number. How can you be a good employer and conduct these same conversations, finding good compromises, keeping communication clear and respectful?
Yeah, I mean, I run a team as well, and I've had to sit down with all of them and understand where they're at. I think we are, everyone around the globe is rebuilding culture or taking a lens on what is the culture I'm trying to foster within my own organisation or my own team, and really getting clear on where they're up to and what they need from us. And what's not working for them. But also I think it's about sharing with them the struggles that you're experiencing as the boss, as the business owner, as the manager. And I think that's the crack that COVID's given us, is that opportunity for us to be real and say, hey, this is hard. And the business might not keep going if we don't do something. And so, the thing with, say you run a cafe, your cafe might have used to open at 6 in the morning and stay open till 3 in the afternoon. What do we have to do to change the business so that it is successful and we all keep a job, but also we don't feel broken or used. So it's really about being honest and opening these conversations and sitting down with someone. If somebody has had their time with you, you need to wish them well and help them into the next job that comes their way that's the right thing for them. But if you can just sit down and be honest rather than be a little bit scared to have these conversations, you can save really good people.
You mentioned the scenario of the employer giving you a phone call. It's often the way, and I'm not sure why, that the employer will ask of those more exacting favours, often out of the blue, a little haphazardly, phone calls, things that are a bit more informal and impersonal. Is there strategy behind that? Is there a reason employers are more inclined to be asking you without the formality of an email or any kind of opportunity for forethought?
You're making me think there, David. I don't know. I think often there's a problem we need to solve it, and that, I can always rely on Jenny, and so we always go to Jenny, and that's actually the problem, is that Jenny gets tired because Gary and John and Peter are not the ones that you're going to. So you sort of have to take a step back and think, who am I calling? Who is my go-to? And what am I doing for them? And for them to be able to raise it with you, for Jenny to feel comfortable to say, hey, mate, that's again, I know I respect that you love that I am your reliable one, but let's upskill the others so they're just as reliable. So I just think it's actually, there's a problem, we need to solve it, rather than anyone, a lot of forethought going into it. But I could be wrong.
No, you've made me think, because in the book I was just discussing, No Words, the main character resents the fact that she's portrayed as the sensible one in the family. So she's the one who carries the most responsibility. I just think what I read is what you just resonated. Often there is a typecasting of characters within a workforce, and that can be, I'd imagine, just as problematic when it comes to negotiating. What role you play in this drama?
Absolutely, and it's the same in families. My dad has different expectations on the oldest son versus the middle girl and things like that. And thankfully I have great conversations with my siblings to say, okay, can you help me here? Because I feel like sometimes Dad has different standards. Well, I know he does. And it's like, that's actually not making me feel that. For me, that's not fair, and you're not being reasonable. So, this happens in the family dynamic, it happens in the workplace. Now, what I had to learn, I guess, is I've always kept it reliable, but at what point do I sort of stand up and put my arms up and say, hey, it's too much? And I do this with clients as well. I find sometimes with a client, if I see their name on my phone, it's like, oh. And that means that they've asked too much of me this month, this week, or relative to the scope of work that they've signed off on. So I actually need to sit back and go, maybe I need to renegotiate that deal. Maybe I just need to tell them, hey, actually you've expended your, allocated effort that's contracted with us at the moment. So again, I guess it comes back to having those uncomfortable conversations and feeling okay with that, whether it's about money or how I'm being treated or what people are expecting of me.
17 minutes to 10 in Victoria, 17 to 8 in the West. David Astle with you on ABC Evenings, and I'm chatting to Sam Trattles, who's the author of I Love Negotiating and the CEO of othersideofthetable.com.au, as well as Negotiating Your Worth, the book, the topic of tonight. Here's an interesting text, Sam. This says that my mates and I talk about our pay regularly. Employers are not going to inform you of what you are worth, and it saved a few graduate friends from awful job offers because of that open candour, just because they have no idea what the market rates are. It seems a pretty healthy culture, although it's not one that often happens. A lot more people on contract within a contracted workplace are more protective of what they're paid and what their terms are. I just don't know what the right approach would be in that context, Sam.
I love it. I think that's so healthy. I didn't start talking to my friends about what salary I was earning until I'd left corporate. And it was so irritating for me because I was always sitting there during pay review or going for a new job where I didn't really know how to benchmark myself. And we have to be careful of not keeping up with the Joneses, and not comparing ourselves to friends that are at different levels or in different industries and things like that. But having a discussion about what do you get paid and how does that get calculated and where are you comparing yourself to? You know, all the people in your friend group, you're not, you know, it's not something for every barbecue, but your closest friends, you know, how did they go about negotiating that? How did they go about benchmarking themselves? Did a recruiter tell you? Did they look on online? Did they look on LinkedIn? Have they gone to the award rates on the government website? So all these things are little pieces of information that we gather that mean that we're more comfortable to negotiate our worth. And I think, that, again, it comes back to this cultural taboo and corporate taboos, actually, because corporates will often contract us that we can't talk about our salaries. And that's not very healthy. And for me, I've always been very open about, within my team, people are at the same level, earn the same amount. So asking your boss, you know, what does everybody earn around here? What do I earn relative to the people who sit next to me and do exactly the same job as me? And I know that's a very challenging conversation to have.
Question.
Yeah, but it's really important to ask, and finding a way that works for you to ask that question.
Battles to win. That's always the precept of family dynamics as much as it is for the workplace, knowing which is the battle worth winning. How do you come to that triage, Sam?
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma, isn't it? So I used to fight the fight because I am all about what's fair and what's reasonable. And I've worked out that they'll have to take a step back and just go, oh, hang on a minute. I can't fight every fight. And when I lay my head on the pillow every night or that night, what is the one thing that I wake up thinking the next morning and going, no, that's still irritating me. So I often will sleep on it because it always comes out better in the morning. But it also, for me, it helps me to go, that's the thing. That's the thing I'm actually annoyed about. And I think we have to, you know, the emotive part of our brains will blow up. But we actually have to think about, why am I angry? I'm not just angry because Jenny said that the 10th time. I'm actually angry because I don't feel valued. So really getting to what's the problem and are there other places that this is happening in, so I actually can have the same conversation with 3 people in my life. And that will be, you know, could be doing one simple thing can actually change so many different conversations in your life.
I'd like to get you back on in a little while and have something of a forum, because I'm sure there would be a lot of scenarios and a lot of dilemmas that many listeners would be able to share. So it's if you're up for that, Sam, I would love you to be part of it.
That'd be wonderful.
But either way, it's been enlightening and really edifying. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Beautiful. Thanks, David. Thanks. I appreciate you having me.
Sam Trattles is my guest, and her work you can see in I Love Negotiating, in her other book, Negotiating Your Worth, and she also heads up othersideofthetable.com.au.